I watched, old, asylum videos of people that had Folie, Deux, and it was like heartbreaking, scary. I'm nobody. I haven't done anything with my life like you have. Let's get out of here. Of course, I thought about all of the ways Harley Quinn has been in the world before this script. But it was exciting to me to create Lee in Todd and Joaquin's world. And their world for Joker was so different than anyone that we had seen before. And this story of Arthur Fleck, this story of the birth of Joker, is extremely heartfelt and emotional. So I knew that Lee had to also be grounded in that same kind of humanity for this movie to work. So I worked a lot with Todd and Joaquin every single day on how to bring out her humanity amidst a film and a story that's wild. For once in my life, I didn't feel so alone anymore. I did research on Folie Deux and looked up the sort of medical, explanation of it. Some people refer to it as double insanity. Other people talk about it being this, condition where two people who have psychosis, one gives psychosis to the other person. They believe a shared fantasy, a shared delusion, and to each other and those around them, they will defend their fantasy at any cost. And I watched, old, asylum videos of people that had Folie Deux, and it was like heartbreaking, scary, and also a very extreme version of what people do when they're in love. They will defend each other. They will say, his dreams are my dreams. When we are in love, sometimes we will do, insane things. And so Folie Deux to me is just an expression of love. And I think it's used in an interesting way in the title of this film to sort of, beckon the question, like, what is insanity really? And aren't we all a little bit insane? But I'm just in love with you. We made a movie that will show people that no matter how different someone is in society or how much you can underestimate them or think less of them, that they still have this really abundant capacity to love. And that love kind of is the thing that makes us all the same.
What's changed?
Well, I'll tell you what's changed. I'm not alone anymore.
I would say that working with Todd, working with Joaquin as closely as collaborators every day was extremely eye-opening for me about the filmmaking experience and how could I actually come to set knowing that I might discover the character in the scene. And in what ways do we inhibit ourselves from knowing who a character could be by deciding ahead of time? So it was really fun. Todd is extremely free and experimental. Joaquin is extremely free and experimental. Between the two of them, it was clear to me that a film that in a lot of ways is nonlinear also had a process that was nonlinear. So I always knew who Lee was inside, but I never came to set with a preconceived idea. In fact, I worked really hard to throw those ideas away and just try to be as honest as I could in every scene. I think that people fell in love with Arthur and that he, as he moved through society, was getting beaten up over and over again, both physically and metaphorically. He was different. He had a hard time. It seemed like no matter what he did, he could not catch a break. And I think people all over the world resonated with that feeling within themselves. And so I think people saw a little bit of themselves in Arthur. And that was sort of the magic trick of that first movie, is that everyone felt connected to somebody that was seemingly so different.
She told me I had a purpose. To bring laughter and joy to the world. Hey, stop them!
I loved working with Joaquin. He was just amazing to experience this whole process with. I learned so much about acting working with him, and I had so much fun doing all of the music with him and the dance routines. It was just extremely imaginative and creative and really fun. He's very funny all the time. But also, I feel like I learned that coming onto set with an idea of what you're gonna do is the enemy. And that was an amazing sort of revelation and very freeing. I feel like he has kind of an instrument with his, emotions and personality that is really unlike anything I've ever experienced. His instrument is remarkable. Without question, this movie was meant for movie theaters, and it is a theatrical experience. Like, literally, the movie is a theatrical experience, but not in the way that anyone would sense. It's a movie that the sound, the score, the feeling in the theater just completely transports you into the minds of the characters and the director. You can do anything you want. You're Joker.
Well, the first one was really such a huge success for us, and it was a whirlwind with everything, and also kind of the controversy of the first one. It was a lot to go through, so it took a long time to kind of get over that. And then at the same time, COVID was starting, so in some ways, the world felt like it was getting even crazier. And Scott and I would talk on the phone about possibly, what would we do if we were going to do a sequel, and it just sort of kind of slowly evolved. When you make hit movies, you get goodwill, goodwill from the studios, but that goodwill is very perishable, so you have to use it quickly. So yeah, I mean, when you have the opportunity coming off of something like Joker, and you go, well, we could kind of do anything, and we could kind of do something that challenges us. I'm talking about Scott and I as writers, me as a filmmaker, Larry as a cinematographer. Really, how can we challenge ourselves in a way of something we've never done before? We didn't want to do a sequel that was a rehash of the first film. We wanted the movie to feel entirely different, but the first film still had a language that we follow in this movie. I mean, the color palette in the beginning of this film very much leaves where we left off in the first film, and it's not until Lee is introduced, and it is not until magic comes back into Arthur's life and music comes back into Arthur's life that things start to shift for him. Well, I mean, I think if you love the first film, it's because you loved Arthur, because really the first film was all Arthur all the time. So hopefully there's still that love for Arthur, the character, and that's kind of what we leaned into. I thought there was a ton of more love than we thought. I mean, the movie was way bigger than any of us thought. So I think it was big, not because of what Larry and I did or we shot it, not because of the sets that Mark built. It was because of this love for the character that Joaquin created. So we just thought, well, if we lean into that, and we really lean into taking Arthur apart and breaking Arthur down by the end of it, it just felt right. Music choices, obviously, in something like this is a huge thing, but it always wanted to feel like stuff that Arthur knew, that maybe his mom played you know, in the apartment or when he was growing up. And a lot of that came from that. I mean, if you remember in the first film, he's listening to Lawrence Welk with his mother while she's giving him a bath, you know, on the radio. So we always kind of wanted to embrace the kind of old school vibe of music. And it was very consciously not original songs because, you know, we wanted it to, things that Arthur knew. And we didn't think it would make sense to have some great songwriter come in and write original music. A, you're not going to get near to what we were at with the standards we used, but also it didn't feel very Arthur to sort of create these original songs. We thought it was really important if we're going to do music in the film in the way that we did it, that the person we cast opposite Arthur kind of brings music with them. It's always helpful that it makes sense to an audience, not just that the person brings music with them, but also why are they singing and why now? What we really tried to stay away from in the film is just they break out into song. There's always a reason, something that pushes them into that. They always kind of fumble their way into it. Do you know what I mean? It's to make it feel a little bit more organic to the film. But you know, I had worked with Stephanie peripherally. I was a producer on A Star Is Born. I became friendly with her. She's an enormous talent, obviously. So we started writing it. Scott and I just sort of kind of started writing it with her in mind. The singing came from a place of emotion and not a place of technique. And that's a kind of a granular way of looking at it, but Stephanie and I would have those conversations, you know what I mean? It's very easy for a professional singer to fall back on technique, but we were more interested in falling into emotion. It's hard to explain what the movie is without getting into sort of the specifics of what it is, but, you know, essentially it's the story of identity. It's the story of, you know, who is Arthur Fleck and who is Joker, at least through his own eyes, and what does it mean, you know, to have to embrace your true self and who you are, which is what he has to ultimately do at the end. Mark and I talked really early on about it wanting to feel the way you would have made this movie a long time ago, you know, not with CG sets and blue screens, and it was very much wanted to feel at least the sections that were musical, that were fantasy, because they're not all fantasy, all the music sections, but the fantasy parts feel like a throwback to how they made those movies then. I have not had the luxury of being on other people's sets. So, you know, when you're a director, you don't work on other people's movies. So you're only really been on your own set. I've visited maybe 3 times in my life for 2 hours other people's movie sets. But for me, it has nothing to do with Joker. I mean, if you came to the set of The Hangover, if you came to the set of Old School, they always felt chaotic. And I always thought that's how it's supposed to be done. So I might be wrong, but I always think like you want to set the tone of the film on the set of the film. Often I've made movies that chaos is underneath it, so maybe that's why I do it. But yeah, I think when people come to the set, I'm always surprised that they're surprised at how kind of loosey-goose it feels. We always have a plan, of course, but we just like the ability to veer from that whenever possible. And I think it helps actors, and, you know, it feeling loose and feeling like anything can happen. It feels like the day feels more alive. I will forever make movies for theaters. I never understand, and I have friends and colleagues that make movies for streamers, but I just will never do it, ever, no matter what. I'd rather just not make films because I really believe that the theatrical experience, obviously, this is not something new I'm saying, but it's second to none, and it's such a huge part of the experience of watching a film, not just in the shared common space with 400 strangers, but in just the sheer size and sound and feeling you get and that the film evokes. So Larry and I, Mark and I, every crew member and I, we make these films for the theatrical experience. And particularly this one, Larry and I really leaned into the IMAX a lot. And I think if you see this movie on IMAX, particularly like the true IMAX, like at Universal City Walk, it's crazy.
I'll tell you what's changed. I'm not alone anymore.
别忘了订阅我们的频道，打开小铃铛就不会错过任何精彩内容，随时上架。我们下回再见。